Welcome everybody, and today we're going to be discussing the Competency Framework and the Accreditation system. And we have a very international panel today, and it's to welcome people from New Zealand. That's Pauline and Steve. We have Wendy from Holland, we have Chris from Ireland, and we have Dan and Richard from England. And all of our panel are either accredited practitioners working towards accreditation, or they're running organisations where they also have practitioners being trained and working towards accreditation. So what we're going to do is to start off by talking about the competency framework. And by this, you'd have seen in our preceding clip that the framework covers 6 criteria for each of the 5 steps. So that's 30 in total. And we also have our counselling competency framework where there are 5 criteria. So I'm going to start by asking Dan about how useful he's found using the competency framework.
Thanks, Jill. So I think for me, the competency framework adds structure to the sessions. So it's easier to follow, especially when you've got someone who's new to therapy, maybe, who might go down therapist drift and start talking about things that are not in the session. So I think it helps keep structure to the session. Also means that you don't miss anything. So if you follow the structure, you cover each point and then you don't miss anything, which also ensures that each person receiving 5-step gets a similar therapy or the same therapy. And it also keeps the focus on the family member and stops you drifting to talk about the person who's maybe gambling or what the other addiction that might be involved.
Okay, thanks Dan. So you've obviously found that very useful. I'd like to move on to Chris.
Thanks, Jill. For myself, I think what's really valuable about the framework itself, and in particularly the self-assessment, is that for me, one of the key elements of practice, like, is in the preparation and planning, and the framework and the self-assessment is laid out exactly as any practitioner needs. It has the criteria needed for each one of the steps. So when you're getting ready, and particularly when you're getting ready to record for the first time, you know the areas that you're looking to cover in each actual criteria. I think that's really helpful. When you're looking to assess then at the end, again, it's only highlighting exactly the areas that you need to cover. It's very detailed and it lays out where you need to cover. And I think that we don't often get the opportunity to listen back to our work. And I suppose I remember myself being pleasantly surprised with some of the feedback that I got when recording and when after handing in my recording, and that it was an excellent kind of breakdown of all the areas that I needed to cover, but it also gave a detailed breakdown of all the pieces that I did well. And I found that increased kind of motivation and kind of a bit of enthusiasm around practice, like, but really kind of increased competency in that area.
Great, thanks, Chris. So it sounds like it was really helpful, the structure, giving you confidence and giving you feedback related to each of those areas. So thank you for that. And I think it's useful also that, as well as the competency framework, that is also done as a handy checklist. So that can be something that's very useful for the practitioners to have in front of them and sort of tick off that they've done every area. So I'd just like to now move to Richard.
Thank you, Jill. I think actually both Dan and Chris have said an awful lot of what I wanted to also say about why the competency framework was so useful. I think for me, the 5-step method is conceptually very simple, but it's also deceptively simple. The fact that there's a clear and simple structure to the model, stress leads to strain influenced by how you cope and the amount and quality of support you have, and a clear and simple structure to the 5 steps, with each step covering one major area, can suggest that delivering the 5-step method to a high standard is also simple, and it isn't. There are lots of specific competencies and lots of specific skills that a good 5-step method practitioner demonstrates, and the competency framework lists what they are as a constant reminder of all of the competences and skills needed to deliver the whole 5-step method intervention. So that's the first reason why I think it's really a useful thing to have. The second one is something that Dan mentioned. It ensures fidelity to the model and to the method. And that's important because of what we know as the training dilution effect. And that simply means that people's ability to do anything that they have been trained to do deteriorates from the moment that they complete the training. And that's the case with anything, from being trained in 5-step methods through to learning how to use a computer or to drive a car. And the 3 ways to ensure that the training dilution effect does not happen are having a competency framework, which reminds people of the key points in the training, and the trained person doing lots of practice, and the person getting lots of feedback on their performance, allied to the competency framework. So having the competency framework is a major part of reducing the training dilution effect. And the third reason why the competency framework is so important is that it emphasizes the fact that the 5-step method is a semi-structured intervention. So a good delivery of the 5-step method is not simply someone adopting a client-centered stance or a CBT stance or a motivational interviewing stance, although all 3 of those approaches are core to how we deliver the 5-step method. But as well as being informed by motivational interviewing and by client-centered and cognitive behavioral principles, it also has a clear structure to it. And the competency framework emphasizes that structure, which so many family members and so many practitioners really find useful.
Thank you, Richard. I think that's an excellent summary there. So thank you very much. And so, Wendy, your experience of using the competency framework.
Thank you, Jill. Yeah, I found it very useful to use as a guideline throughout my session, and also to give a clear and good agenda at the beginning of a session, so the family member also knows what we're going to do. So it really helped me structure the beginning, but also the rest of the session. And it was kind of like I could peek every now and then if I was on track, and that's very helpful and very useful, I think, for both the family member and the practitioner.
Okay, thank you, Wendy. And moving on to Steve.
Thanks, Jill. Aside from all the comments that people have made around how useful it is to have the competency framework for the actual 5 steps, I think it's really useful that we also have a framework for our core counselling skills. What I found was that doing the self-reflection and getting the feedback on those actually improved not only how I did the 5-step method, but also improved my counselling skills for other clients that I saw, whether it be actual people with an addiction problem or other related counselling that I did. So yeah, it allowed me to focus on the structure of my session, the skills that I used, the core counselling skills that are so important to building a relationship with our clients, which is one of the most important things in what we do.
Okay, thank you, Steve. So just to summarise there, so people have found the competency framework very useful. The key thing is it does provide this very good structure, both for the practitioner and the family member. It sets the agenda. And as Steve said, not only that for the 5 steps, but it also provides the core counselling skills, which helps your work in that area and many other areas of work. And Richard has also outlined around fidelity to the model as well. So thank you very much for that. We're now going to move on to ask people about their experience of accreditation, either for themselves personally, and also if they're running an organisation, their experience of ensuring that all their practitioners are accredited. So I'm going to ask Pauline about that first of all.
Thank you, Jill. At Family Drug Support Aotearoa New Zealand, we insist that people are accredited after they do their training if they want to work with family members in the organisation. It's a big ask, it's gold standard, but it actually makes a huge difference having practitioners who are accredited. I feel it's really important to have this understanding set up right when you start the training, so that people know this is the expectation and it's part of the training. It's really important that people are able to see how they can use the competency frameworks, how they can use all the other things that make the 5 steps such an amazing intervention, through doing the accreditation process. And the value of it is absolutely astounding, because they're hearing themselves, they're going through this accreditation process and improving their own practice all the time. So we just insist that accreditation is carried out, but we make sure that it's set up right at the beginning of training, and that the supervision is very, very strong around the practitioners as they do the accreditation process, because people do need that supervision set up right at the start.
Okay, thank you, Pauline. So I'd just like to now move on to Steve around the accreditation process.
Thanks, Jill. I found the accreditation process really, really helpful. Even though it did take, obviously, a large amount of time to listen to my own recordings and then write my notes, and then re-listen and write my notes again to make sure that I was really confident in what I did before I submitted my my recordings. And then I was, what else I found useful was getting the feedback and actually being able to kind of compare what I thought of myself with what somebody else thought of myself. I found that that really improved my skills, not just my actual counselling skills, but my skills to assess myself as well. So the process was confidence building for me, and worth all the time that I actually spent listening to it and re-listening to it, and then going back over the feedback. That was all quite helpful.
Great, well that's good to hear, and that's something that many practitioners say, is the feedback they're getting is gold standard and it helps to improve their practice. So thank you for that. So moving on to Chris's experience.
Thanks, Jill. I suppose for myself, I directly relate my own level of competency, which is by no means perfect, in direct proportion to the accreditation process. We come out with a particular amount of information from training, and we bring what we're able to. We may come out with this level of competency, but then we go through the accreditation process and our competency comes up to this degree. And I think this is really important to know, because the knock-on effect then to the family member is actually huge. We become so familiar with the practice and what it is that we're looking to complete and fulfill, that the family member themselves get so much more out of it. Also, I suppose from an assessor perspective, when I listen to practitioners going through the recordings, you can hear someone becoming more confident in their practice. You can hear them becoming more familiar with the opening and closing of the steps and the different aspects and different criteria of it, and that you can hear how much more familiar they are when it comes to the last step. And the accreditation process, I think, is really important, not to underestimate its importance. In Ireland, the National Family Support Network, as you know yourselves, has played a major role in the rollout of the 5-step method over the last number of years. And there's a very strong emphasis on accreditation, and its importance. And that because itself and its affiliated organizations are able to stand over the accreditation and are very familiar with the different levels of competency.
Thank you, Chris. So what you're saying there, it's really helped raise your own competency level and that of the organisation. It gave you confidence, and most importantly, that is then reflected in the interaction with the family member. So thank you for that. Moving on now to Dan in the Leeds Addiction Service that specialises in gambling for his views on this.
Cheers, Jill. So I think overall the accreditation process has been sort of a really good thing for our service, but also challenging at the same time. So how it's sort of been good is it ensures that the staff are all getting trained properly in a therapy, and someone is watching the videos. They're watching the videos. We've set up a group supervision where we go through each step and watch someone's recording on that step, and it's it's made the team bond, as well as making sure that we all do an effective treatment. Another thing I would say that's good about it is the team now feel part of something. So the people are getting accredited, or they are accredited, so they feel part of this therapy, and it means a lot that they're doing it properly and an effective service to my team. I think the challenges, I would say, is just making sure you've got enough time to do this, and also that you've got the facilities to record sessions, or audio record or video record, as well as having clients refer to your service who need 5-step, because obviously our service is for people with gambling problems as well. So it's making sure you've got a referral pathway for people who may be affected by someone's gambling as well.
Okay, thank you, Dan. And moving on to Wendy, what's been positive for you?
Thank you, Jill. I think we had a bit of an extra challenge because we train people, we do the 5-step sessions in Dutch, and we are accredited in English, of course. So that made it a bit of an extra challenge and took a bit of extra time as well. But I must say that it was very, very helpful. I learned so much more, and I really like the depth, the fact that you can get your feedback so detailed on specific things that it's really clear and helpful to know what you need to change or what you need to do to get better. And that made it take a lot of time and a real hard thing sometimes, but also fun, because you notice when things are improving. And I think for me as a practitioner, I really learned a lot, and I also hear that from other people in our service who say it's such a nice way to learn about your own work and your own skills, and it's improving for everybody because it's such a wide range. And also the second table, I've noticed a lot of practitioners who said, I've always been afraid to drop that silence, and 5-step made me learn it because now I had to. So it made me learn it, and now I'm confident using it. So I think not only for me, but for a lot of people in our organization, it has been a great way to learn.
Thank you, Wendy. So that's interesting. A couple of people there mentioning about the time it takes, but it being absolutely worth it. And it's a nice way of learning. And also Wendy emphasizing there about the counselling skills, and because you're getting feedback, it can really enhance those, as the example Wendy giving about the use of silences being very powerful. So thank you for that, Wendy. And finally, moving on to Richard's experience.
Well, it seems I think there are 2 points I want to make. The first one is that the accreditation process is really important and adds a lot of value to all the groups that are involved in delivering the 5-step method. And those groups are, of course, family members themselves, practitioners, organizations, and commissioners of service. And it brings added value to all of those groups. So it's important for affected family members because it ensures they get a high quality service that has good fidelity to the evidence-based intervention. So what the accreditation process means that what family members get is much better. It's important for practitioners because they want to offer something to their clients which is effective and which they know is offering it to a high standard. But because of the treatment dilution effect that we talked about earlier, it means the longer the distance between their training and their counselling, the more drift there's going to be. So having to record their actual practice with family members and then having to listen to their actual practice afterwards and then rate themselves against the competency framework, and then getting lots of helpful feedback on that practice. All of that means that the treatment dilution effect is minimized and they deliver the 5-step method to a really high standard. It's important to organizations because they need to be confident that their practitioners are delivering the service that their organization is claiming to deliver. And if their practitioners are accredited, then they can be confident in this. And with that confidence, they can then argue with commissioners for more funding, secure in the knowledge that their practitioners are delivering to a high standard and keeping fidelity to this intervention. And of course, it's important for commissioners, as this allows them to be confident that the evidence-based intervention that they're commissioning is being delivered by practitioners who are of the required standard, and hence what they're delivering has been done correctly and well. And the other thing I want to say is that it's been apparent over the years that what we've developed in the 5-step method is a gold standard way of doing it. It's very rare to have a system where people do actually listen to themselves delivering an intervention, and then they compare their practice to a competencies framework. It's very rare for people to get such detailed feedback from other people over how they're actually performing. And it's very rare for people to be given an action plan as to how they can improve. So those things together make this a very unusual and quite a gold standard system, which does take a lot of time, but all the feedback that we've received from all practitioners, I think, who've ever done it, and from organizations, is that it has improved people's skills and their confidence greatly.
Thank you, Richard. So I think that's an excellent summary there. And to reiterate that this accreditation system, it has benefits, the greatest benefit for the family members, it has benefit for the practitioner, it has benefit for the service, and that can be an individual service or services across the country. It's particularly important for funders, and it is a gold standard service. So I think we've had a nice range of people saying different things about the accreditation system there. And now we're going to move on to asking our practitioners about what tips they have for the accreditation process. And I'm going to start with Steve.
Thank you, Jill. I suppose I'm in a somewhat unique position, or perhaps not unique, in that I've gone through 3 different accreditation processes for the 5-step method. Firstly, the accreditation process to become a practitioner, which we hope that the majority of people do. I've gone through an accreditation process to become a trainer of practitioners, and I've actually gone through an accreditation process to be an accreditor of accreditors, if that makes sense, as well as trainers, actually. So that might be 4 processes. I think one of the 2 main tips that I have is, one is to acknowledge that this is going to take time, that and it's not something that should be rushed. You need time to listen to yourself. For me, I listened to myself more than once, and then I had time to write down what I observed, and then I had time to actually put it all together and make sense of it. And then actually you need time to read your feedback and compare it to what you've got. So time, making sure you're having lots of time is the key thing. My first tip. The second tip, I suppose, is to not take any critical feedback or criticisms personally. The people who give you the feedback give it in with the greatest intent of encouraging you to do better, as well as acknowledging what you've done well. So don't be frightened of putting yourself out there on show for someone to critique you. And when I deliver training, I make sure to tell people that, you know, don't be frightened of it, that this is a tool for you to get better at what you do. So they're my 2 tips, I suppose.
Okay, thank you, Steve. And moving on to Pauline.
Thank you, Jill. I think it's really important to realise that there are 2 sections to the accreditation. There is Table 1 and Table 2. Table 1 is the skills you're demonstrating, and Table 2 are the counselling skills you're demonstrating. And I think it's my tip is that you need to be thinking about both of those as you're working through. And that's quite difficult when you're starting off, because you're thinking about what you have to deliver, but you're also thinking about the skills, the counselling skills that you're demonstrating. So remember both of those. The second tip I'd say is that this is something, this accreditation will give you a lot of confidence in having an excellent way to do therapy through the 5-step system. And that confidence builds as you get more experience, but right from the beginning you can gain confidence by actually doing the accreditation, because you feel safe doing this work that's so structured. So those are my 2 tips.
Okay, thank you very much. Over to Wendy for her tips around the accreditation.
Thank you, Jill. Yeah, a lot of good things are said, I think, but I'd like to add that when you're not very confident or you don't really know how to go into depth on some things, you could try to discuss it with someone who's already accredited, or someone who accredited you and gave you feedback. So don't hesitate to talk about the things you find hard, and try to deliver it again. And realize that it takes time. It's normal to get in those situations. And besides that, I'd like to say that taking the time to
It's 9 hours.
work with it really can help you to get further in your process. And sometimes it really helps to just try again and deliver something new. And that helped me. So
okay,
yeah.
Thank you, Wendy. So it sounds like a positive experience, and the great thing is, yes, getting some feedback, getting some help, and improving your practice. So that sounds great. Thank you very much. So I'd like to move on to Chris for his experience.
Thank you, Jill. I suppose just 2 main tips from myself, and I'm just repeating one of them that I just think is really important, is allowing yourself the time, because time is needed, like, for being able to sit down and assess and evaluate when you're going through your recording. Like, there is some pausing and thinking about particular portions of the criteria. And the other one then is that, you know, when you're getting ready to sit down and assess yourself, I would advise to let the session play out, and without assessing or evaluating, just to give you an overall sense of the session in flow. So then when you're getting ready to pause to assess, you already have a good idea of the flow of the session itself. And I think it adds then to the perspective on when you're looking to identify particular criteria. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Chris. They're very helpful tips. And moving on finally to Dan.
Thanks. So I've got 2 tips what sort of roll into one. So the tips that I would say is have regular supervision, and we do that as a group supervision. And the bit that falls into that is record. Like, people are anxious about recording. So I think the more sessions you can record, even if it's not 5-step, to get comfortable with that process, and then share that in supervision and do live supervision is my tip.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So for everybody here, they've given a range of tips. One of the big things is about having time, but spending the time is very positive. And to remember that people are looking at the 5-step skills and the counselling skills as well. So do have that checklist in front of you. For many people, getting advice from other people and getting the feedback has proved very positive, and the importance of supervision, and then some practical things, obviously, about getting used to recording yourself. So I'd like to thank everybody very much for giving their thoughts about the accreditation process.
Yeah, one final tip that I'd give, and I remember doing this myself, is that when I first walked into the sessions, trying it out for the first time with clients, I actually had the criteria written out on a sheet in front of me as like a running sheet or a checklist for the session, both for the counselling skills as well as for the skills for each of the steps. So as I was going through the session with the client, with the family member, I could actually say, oh, that's right, I need to ask about this, or I need to do this bit. So it meant that by the end of it, I was assured that I had ticked all the boxes, so to speak, in terms of the assessment criteria.
Okay, thank you, Steve. I think that's a really important point. You can either obviously just write some notes to yourself, or there is a checklist, and a handy checklist, 2 sides of A4 that you can have in front of you. And I say it's no problem to have that with you and to tick it off and to tell the family member that's what you're doing. So I think that's a very good tip. So thank you to all. I'm just going to sum up some of the key points from the panel discussion. So The framework really gives a very good structure. It ensures fidelity to the model, and it definitely reduces the dilution effect of the training by following all the competencies in the framework. And it also emphasises that it is a semi-structured intervention. And one of our panel, Dan, he mentioned it really gives confidence about the fact that you're doing the right thing at the right time. And it also ensures throughout the service that everyone is doing a similar intervention. Lots of practitioners have said it helps manage time with the family member as you know what you've got to do. And having that checklist with you can be really handy. It also sets out the expectations for practitioners very clearly, and ensuring that the whole organisation is committed is really important. A key tip was ensuring that the audio tapes come in one at a time so that feedback can be given in a timely manner, and this makes sure that the practitioner really embeds some of those key learning points. Our colleagues from Holland emphasised about the cultural differences and the use of language. So it's important in whichever country, and also within regions within countries, that you think about this and have a discussion. Everybody emphasised that the time to do the accreditation is quite lengthy, but it's definitely worth it. It really helps improve people's skills. Lots of people said about supervision to help with the accreditation process. That can be incredibly helpful. And we do have a separate video clip about supervision. And our panel mentioned that you really get a great deal of feedback by doing the accreditation. So it raises your competency level as well as your confidence. And most importantly, it ensures quality for the family member, the practitioner, and the local or national country and the funders. And it's a gold standard for people, and all of our panel really have found it incredibly useful. So I hope those give you some of the key points around the competency framework and the accreditation. And thank you very much to everybody that's been involved.